A Sean Diddy Combs accuser has apparently filed a new police report and may be planning to file another. What the latest developments in this ongoing alleged sexual abuse scandal mean for the embattled rapper and producer. I'm going to sit down with entertainment attorney Michael Stevens to get to the bottom of it. Welcome to Sidebar, presented by Law&Crime. I'm Jesse Weber. All right, so we're back talking about Sean Diddy Combs' legal saga, and we have another interesting update for you. Now, you might remember we talked on a previous Sidebar about how former adult film star Adria English, who filed a 114-page federal lawsuit in the Southern District of New York against Combs and other defendants, sex trafficking, sexual assault. We talked about this, and represents, I think, the 9th lawsuit that has been filed against Combs since November of last year, when Combs' ex-girlfriend, Cassandra Ventura, filed her sexual abuse lawsuit against him. And that started the whole ball rolling. Multiple lawsuits with similar sexual assault and sex trafficking claims. A reported federal criminal investigation being launched, possibly focused on Combs. The reported impaneling of a grand jury in New York hearing evidence. Although, to be clear, no charges or arrests have been made at the time of this recording, but you can see how so much has happened. By the way, as we talk about Combs, and we have discussed the effect these allegations and legal developments have had on his business empire and finances, it did get me thinking, how many of you are business owners out there, or maybe are trying to start a business? I ask that because we have this amazing sponsor known as Odoo that I want to mention to you. So Odoo is a free all-in-one business management software that provides you with a range of applications that can help with the day-to-day of owning a business. So for example, I'm the host and executive producer of a popular YouTube show called Prime Crime. It's on the Law&Crime YouTube page. And say if we ever wanted to charge for Prime Crime, and we don't have any plans to do that, so don't worry, but I could seamlessly and for free build a Prime Crime website with Odoo and put a built-in checkout page on the website with very little effort. Look how easy that was. primecrime.com. And you can build your website now too. The domain is free for the first year when you use our link odoo.com/LC Sidebar. Hope you can check it out. But back to English, because that's what we're going to be talking about right now, this new development. She claims in her lawsuit that she was used as a sexual pawn for the pleasure and financial benefit of others. This was during Combs' infamous white parties. This is when, by the way, everyone dressed up in white attire. Really, really big events. And she claims that Combs forced her into prostitution for years, between 2006 and 2009, accusing Combs of forcing her to take drugs before she was passed off to others. Claims Combs demanded that she have sex with people, for instance, with celebrity jeweler Jacob the Jeweler Arabo, who is a listed defendant in this lawsuit. She claims that Combs threatened to blackball her and her boyfriend from the entertainment industry if she didn't do what he wanted. Now, Combs' attorney, Jonathan Davis, released a statement when this lawsuit was filed, saying, quote, "No matter how many lawsuits are filed, it won't change the fact that Mr. Combs has never sexually assaulted or sex trafficked anyone. We live in a world where anyone can file a lawsuit for any reason without proof. Fortunately, a fair and impartial judicial process exists to find the truth, and Mr. Combs is confident he will prevail against these and other baseless claims in court." And remember, as we talked about in our prior Sidebar, she is suing under various causes of action, various claims, such as violation of the federal racketeering statute, sexual assault, sexual harassment, violation of the New York City Victims of Gender-Motivated Violence Protection Act, violation of Trafficking and Victims Protection Act, aiding and abetting a sex trafficking enterprise, negligent and intentional infliction of emotional distress. Well, now let's get to this latest development. And it is being reported that English has officially filed a police report. Yes, according to TMZ, she reportedly met with Miami Beach PD and relayed similar allegations that she was making from the early 2000s. And this is the first time that she filed a police report with respect to this. Now, it's being reported also that detectives concluded there wasn't enough evidence to investigate sex trafficking or other crimes. And to be clear about that, we are not sure if there was a statute of limitations issue, like these claims are too old that they're time barred, or whether she wasn't credible, or her allegations couldn't be verified or backed up, or maybe her claims don't even rise to the level of a crime. And while again, the reporting indicates that she discussed her claims from back in the day, did something more recent happen that she wanted to file a criminal complaint about? We don't know. But here is what we do know, or at least here is what is being reported. While police aren't going to move forward with this investigation, they did apparently file this report, and they did reportedly share it with federal authorities. That could be significant. Is English a cooperating witness in the federal probe? You know, before this news came out about this police report, my colleague, Anjanette Levy, who hosts Crime Fix on Law and Crime, she interviewed English's attorney. Listen to some of what she had to say then.
So, in the lawsuit, we pretty much spell out the details of the sex trafficking my client faced at the hands of Mr. Combs at his white parties. So, she was essentially sought after due to her relationship with her boyfriend, who was interviewing, or I should say, auditioning with Mr. Combs for his Sean John campaign. That's essentially how things came about. And initially, she was just approached to be a go go dancer. It was all very above board initially, and then eventually, with more time, it turned into being sex trafficked. She was sex trafficked in New York in the Hamptons and then in Miami. And these were all during Mr. Combs's white parties that he was throwing. So we essentially outlined the details of that sex trafficking in her lawsuit. And the reason she came forward now, as you know, a lot of people used to be terrified of Mr. Combs. He's blackballed several people, including my client and her then boyfriend, Mr. Gallo, from the industry. So, as we all know, there's strength with numbers. So, once Miss Ventura came forward, my client had been looking for an attorney for some time prior to finding me to also file a lawsuit because she had been a victim as well.
Has your client testified in front of the grand jury?
She has not, to my understanding, what they already had what they needed, and if they needed her, we would be contacted in the future.
Mhm.
But as of this time, we were just, as you know, and as you just eloquently put it, we are case number 11 in the long line of lawsuits and kind of came in at the very end. So we are expecting justice from the grand jury, just like all the other victims.
Now, of course, circumstances have changed. We have the filing of this police report. And we also have an updated statement from English's attorney, which we're going to get into. But with that, I got the chance to sit down with entertainment attorney Michael Stevens to talk more about this. Here's his take. We haven't talked about the Diddy saga since it began in November of 2023. So before we even get into this latest development with Adria English, what's your overall take on it? I asked that question for everybody who I bring on to talk about this. Just what's your overall take on the whole Diddy saga for the past, in a few months, it'll be a full year.
Yeah, my overall take on the Diddy saga is Diddy's in some hot water. It looks like just the longer it goes on, the worse it's getting for him. Adria English is just another in what I assume will be even more people coming forward. He's got over a dozen lawsuits already active against him, and multiple people coming out with some pretty serious allegations. So it's not looking good for Diddy right now.
And by the way, before we get into her allegations, and not really just this latest development with it, if you were advising him, right? I can imagine representing a celebrity is not easy. And I think the blowback for him, aside from that, he hasn't been found liable in a court of law. He hasn't been arrested. He hasn't been criminally charged at the time of this recording. But the financial blowback, the reputational blowback, that everything has come out. And he has remained relatively quiet. It looks like he has been living his life, aside from him apologizing for the infamous Cassie video that came out several months ago. What would you advise him to be doing right now?
I would probably advise him to keep doing what he's doing, which is keeping his head down. I think strategically settling some of these cases has been a good move. Like you said it, he hasn't been found guilty. Settling is a good way to avoid that. All of the evidence and pieces of media that we've seen suggest that there's a lot of video that he probably doesn't want to come to light, and it probably won't bode well for him. And I would say strategically settling these cases, assuming he can afford it, which based on Adria English's $50 billion civil lawsuit, I think he'll be all right.
Here's the thing with that, though, right? So he settled that first lawsuit with Cassandra Ventura back in November,
Right.
24 hours, and then it was a domino effect. It was lawsuit after lawsuit after lawsuit, and some could say, well, one person comes out, then another person's going to come out, and then another person, everybody's going to have accusations. And when they see that he settled, well, if he settled with one, maybe he'll settle with me. But the other way of looking at it, of course, is if one person finds the strength to come forward, and yes, these are allegations, but if one person comes forward and another person finds the strength, and so they might all be victims, and just because they didn't come forward years ago doesn't take away from the legitimacy of their claims. But again, when you're talking about Adria English, which I think is the 9th lawsuit, what's your take on that?
Yeah, and I obviously, I did not mean that he should settle every case that comes his way. I was drawing on my own personal perception and what I've seen, and that it looks like there is a lot of very incriminating evidence that may come to light as these cases go on. That being said, yes, it does draw people out of the woodwork, many of which are likely victims. I think if you're P. Diddy's attorney, you're going to have to sort through these, and any ones that are obviously, people just trying to get a quick payday, push back on those. But if I'm P. Diddy's team, I'm not letting these go far down the road on trial.
So now I want to talk about this latest development. So Adria English goes to the police all these years after.
Yeah.
My first thought was, isn't it too late? I mean, she's talking, I would imagine, unless something happened recently, if she's talking about what happened to her in the early 2000s, why go to the police now?
Yeah, that's a great question. And this is not uncommon in sexual violence cases, gender violence cases. We've seen it over and over in the last several years, actually. When new facts come out, or when a lot of times victims feel encouraged, seeing other victims come out against, the person that hurt them. And in terms of the statute of limitations, there is often, a ticking clock. But when it comes to this, there are certain provisions that have been put in place, such as the New York Gender Violence Protection Act, that does lift that statute of limitations for a look back at cases like this until March 2025. So legally, she's all right. And, in terms of how she feels about it, we've seen this before, and it makes a lot of sense, to complicate the situation.
That's more for civil claims, right? If she wants to sue him, if she's going to the police for,
right,
for pressing criminal charges, right? And again, I could be wrong here, but when I looked up California law, I was seeing, let's say you're talking about sex trafficking, right? And if there's an offense that's punishable by life imprisonment, I don't think there's a statute of limitations, but if you have an offense where you can be imprisoned for 8 years or more, then you have to file a report you have to commence the action within 6 years. And then if there's one where the offense is punishable for less than 8 years, it has to be commenced within 3 years. So I mean, again, I could be getting the dates wrong, but even so, if you're talking about something from the early 2000s, my first impression would be it's too old. One of the reasons that Los Angeles police couldn't move forward, or LA prosecutors couldn't move forward with charges against Diddy for the 2016 tape that came out of him allegedly beating Cassandra Ventura, is because it was time barred. It was too old. So again, what would be the motivation for her to go to the police to file a report? Is it just to, give her report, give the details, have it memorialized? Is there another thing that I might be missing here?
Yeah, it's strategic, and there's a few factors that could be driving her decision to do that. Obviously, it supports any civil lawsuit that she may have going, but also it helps the police collect further evidence. She's not the only one supplying evidence of past crimes or perceived crimes, and the police want to gather as much intel as they can. There's various cases, various criminal cases, various lawsuits, and it can build, it can support patterns of behavior, and also support other cases that may be ongoing. And sorry, go ahead.
No, I was going to say, the police said there's not enough evidence here to move forward with sex trafficking or any other kind of charges. I don't know if that's because of the time issue, or there's not enough there. They might say there's not enough evidence of probable cause.
Yeah, it's a tough one to pursue. There is the time element, but also it's a tough burden to clear to prove that. And so when the police says that there's not enough evidence to pursue it, it's still valuable to collect that information. It's still valuable to collect, Mrs. English's experiences and any evidence that may support future cases or current cases. And as well, there's also the federal case that's ongoing against Diddy. And this information can
potentially against Diddy. We don't know for sure if they, it looks like the tea leaves would say that they're investigating him and potentially charges could be afoot. Grand jury. I will say, the fact that the police did file the report and they may be sharing it with the feds, that's significant, right?
It feels pretty significant to me, Jesse. Yeah.
Do you think she's working?
Yeah,
you think she's working with the feds on that? Again, what could be a purported sex trafficking investigation out in New York. You think she's working with them?
Yeah, my opinion, yes, I do think she is. I think she is, and I think that what we do know about how the feds work is they work much more silently. They work and they gather and they gather and they build a case, and then you hear about it. By the time we hear about that case, it's gonna, in my opinion, it'll be too late for Diddy. So I do think she's working with them, and I think that. Filing this criminal case with the Miami PD, even knowing it might not go anywhere, there's a bigger play happening here.
But sure. there is a question if the police didn't follow through in this investigation, putting aside the issue of it being time barred. If they didn't find her credible, that could be a problem too, right? Because the feds, if they're building a case, they want to make sure every one of these alleged victims is credible, because if you have one loose chain, everything could fall apart. So the fact that when you have this statement from Florida police saying we're not going to investigate this further, there doesn't seem to be evidence of a crime, that do you think that's problematic for Miss English? Do you think that's problematic for her civil lawsuit?
No, those are two different things. The burden of proof or the required evidence to pursue the criminal case has no bearing on her credibility. It doesn't make, just because the facts aren't enough for a case, it doesn't mean the facts aren't true. It has little to no bearing on her credibility unless we receive more information that the facts supplied are inaccurate. But so far, we're not seeing anything like that.
Let me ask you about this. So Adria's attorney, Ariel Mitchell, told Us Weekly, quote, Miss English is very excited and cautiously optimistic about her journey to justice, starting with the filing of her civil lawsuit on July 3rd, 2024, and now with the filing of a criminal complaint with the Miami Beach Police Department. Miss English hopes to file an additional criminal complaint in New York, but has been precluded to this point as New York requires an individual to be in person in order to file a criminal complaint. We look forward to hopefully being able to pursue justice as quickly as possible with the support of others who are interested in standing with her against the injustice she and others have faced at the hands of Mr. Combs. What do you make of that statement?
It looks like it appears that Mrs. English is very committed to pursuing justice against Mr. Combs. I think based on that statement, if you read between the lines a little, it seems they're aware that it's complex, it's difficult, there's a long road ahead for her particular case, but they also mentioned the other victims, and I think that they are aware that this is another very powerful addition to the mounting cases against Diddy, and those are all, each one is meaningful.
I just thought it was interesting the fact that she can't file the report unless she's in New York, so why not just go to New York? I don't know why you have to say you're precluded, unless I'm missing something. Am I missing something?
Yeah, to me, I just read that as almost like she hasn't gone yet, but she will. I'm wondering what could be more important than this for her, but it sounds like she's planning on going to New York to do it.
Interesting development. All right, I'll ask you now the big question, the question I have been asking everybody since Mr. Combs' homes were raided months ago. Do you believe by the end of the summer, within the next few months, we are going to see an arrest of Diddy, criminal charges filed against him, or not? I know the feds work very methodically. They are not going to pursue a case unless they believe they are going to win. They make a statement with this kind of raid, but it takes a while to build up a case like this, and particularly if you're talking about a lot of allegations, a lot of different players. But I ask you, in your best opinion, we don't know, do you think he's going to be facing charges?
I absolutely predict that he'll be facing charges. I believe there will be an arrest before the end of summer, I think was your question. I think that's a little soon. Yeah, but it's coming. You know, I mean, we've seen it in the past. We've seen it, you know, we saw it with Weinstein. We've seen it, you know, and this is appears to be turning into a very strong cases against him.
I only said by the end of the summer because some of my guests, but then again, I spoke to them several months ago. They said by the end of the summer. It's almost near the end of the summer, but we'll see. I don't know. Really interesting. Look, and at the end of the day, very serious allegations. He seemingly admitted to being involved in that video of beating his ex-girlfriend in the lobby.
Right.
But having said that, he's innocent until proven guilty. He hasn't been charged with anything. We'll see where this goes. I just think this is a big development with her now going to the police. But what effect it'll have, we'll see. Michael Stevens, thanks so much for coming on. Appreciate it.
Thank you, Jesse.
All right, we will continue to follow the latest in the Sean Diddy Combs saga. Thank you so much for joining us here on Sidebar. As always, please subscribe on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, YouTube, wherever you get your podcasts. I'm Jesse Weber. Speak to you next time.